Hello and welcome to Trail Explorers Weekly Whiskey News. It is Tuesday, October the 8th, 2019. I know we're about a day off. Normally we go live on Mondays with Weekly Whiskey News, but I'm actually glad we skipped a day because there was one other piece of news that dropped today that we will talk about. Something a little interesting. Now, over the past week, there's two whiskey more than bourbon related pieces of news that I wanted to talk about for tonight. I say this because one is discussing the tariffs that are coming through, and the other is discussing the Tide Pods of whiskey that Glenlivet is putting out. And in honor of not going mostly bourbon news, I'm going to pour something a little fun. This is the Blade Runner Johnny Walker. It's at 98 proof, so closer to 100 proof, which is higher for Scotch. I really enjoy this pour. I know it's Johnny Walker, and it's nothing super fancy as far as Scotch goes. I have some better Scotches behind me, but you know what? This is a fun one. I really do enjoy it every once in a while. And also, it's the Blade Runner bottle. This is a cool bottle. Like Diageo. Well done on the packaging and suckering me into this. United States tariffs. Single malts will now face a 25% tariff in response to the bourbon tariffs that have been placed overseas. Now, Scotch exports to the U.S. last year were worth about $1.3 billion, with single malts accounting for an incredibly large share of that. What this is I'm drinking a blended whiskey at the moment. Do I have a single malt just within reach? I'm sure I do somewhere in here. I may be lying. Oh, here we go. Ardbeg. I don't know. I'm not even going to begin to try and pronounce it. It's their cask strength single malt. It's one of my favorites. It's an incredible whiskey. For the price, I think it's great. So the U.S. was given the go-ahead to impose the tariffs on $7.5 billion of goods. It imports from the EU following a World Trade Organization ruling on last Wednesday, I think. This has been an ongoing battle between the U.S. and overseas when it comes to whiskey. This is not, look, I know a lot of bourbon drinkers aren't into Scotch, and I understand that, but it's not good for either side. Nothing good comes of this trade war. And people who say that it's only about $1 increase, it's a 25% tariff on the importation. So you have to add on the 3 tiers of margin and taxes. It ends up being about a 20% increase on the shelf, unless somehow the producers, importers, distributors, and retailers all band together to soak up some of that increase to kind of help minimize what we see on the shelf. If it costs the importer $100 to import a bottle, the importer's cost will now be $125. Add the 30% margin to sell to the distributor, 30% to sell to the retailer, and then add another 25 to 30% to the final sale price to the customer. That doesn't include taxes. That doesn't include freight. It's not good news. It's not good news for anybody because variety is what we all really want, right? And when a great bottle of bourbon isn't necessarily available on the shelf in the U.S., there's a lot of great bottles of Scotch, and we never want to see less availability of whiskey. So it's not good, and you know that there's going to be something in retaliation when it comes to the bourbon world overseas, and none of that is good for craft distillers. They take a big hit, and we're seeing a lot of percentage come from overseas for companies like Four Roses. Your Beam sells a ton overseas. Your Jack Daniel's sells a ton overseas. Bulleit sells a ton overseas, and that doesn't mean that we're going to suddenly see allocated bottles when we see those get hurt overseas. It means that it's hurting the overall business line. We're going to see losses of jobs or decreases in production. It doesn't suddenly mean a glut of allocated bottles on the shelves in the US. So that's bad. Those aren't good across the board for anyone. I never want to see tariffs on either side. I would rather see free and open trade between the US and Europe when it comes to whiskey, because that is actually what is good for both sides. Hold on, let's smell this. It smells like a blended Johnny Walker with a little bit of age on it. There's nothing stained on this bottle. It's just a nice, decent blended whiskey. It's good. On to the ridiculous side of the news is the whiskey Tide Pods, the edible Scotch pods, which we could say caused a bit of a stir with whiskey fans. Now, Glenlivet is the Jack Daniels of the Scotch world in a lot of ways. You could say they're a venerable name in the Scotch world, but I'm not sure that's how most Scotch fans would see it. This is a tiny whiskey cocktail that comes in a clear, edible packet instead of glass. Of course, it came with a hashtag for social media called "No Glass Required." If you've ever seen the episode of Parks and Rec where the crew goes to a club, and prior to that, Ron says there's no wrong way to drink alcohol, and then suddenly he's given a lotion of scotch, and he says there is a wrong way to drink alcohol. That's what this is. These are ridiculous. I'm sure they're just meant to cause a stir to get them publicity. Their tagline is to enjoy them, pop the capsule in your mouth, take a bite to release the delicious cocktail ingredients. Pass. I think everyone is a hard pass. It's ridiculous. It probably is to garner publicity off the back of the whole eating Tide Pods thing. Hard pass. The last bit of whiskey news is that Heaven Hill has announced they are releasing a barrel-proof Larceny to the market, aged between 6 and 8 years. This is after the last couple of years they have done single barrel-proof Larceny barrels. I tried several of those. They were $100+ each. They were not very good for $100+ I would not pay $50, which is what they're saying they will charge for the Larceny barrel proof for the product that was given last year. Now, this will be a batched product. I don't think regular Larceny is very good. I think it took stock away from Old Fitzgerald Bottled and Bond, which was a great product for the price, significantly cheaper, better quality, 100 proof, so higher proof. I've never cared for Larceny as a brand. $50 for a 6 to 8 year barrel proof wheated bourbon. Sure. I don't like what Heaven Hill has done over the last few years. I think this continues that trend. Larceny is not a very good product to begin with. I don't know that making it barrel proof has made it any better. The ones that I have tried have not been very good. We'll see how this goes. And that's really all I can say about that, especially after the Bottled and Bond fiasco with the 7-year that came back out. And hey, it tastes exactly like it used to, except that it's $40. Heaven Hill, you're not doing great things lately. We'll see if they continue on this trend. And that's really it for the whiskey news for the week. This has been your weekly whiskey news. We'll get to some more reviews here soon, and we'll get those filmed and posted. Until then, cheers. Have a good evening.